Alright, so today live review of the Bowmore 12-year-old Isla single malt Scotch whiskey. This is a Suntory Global Spirits product. 40% ABV, 80 proof. It's chill filtered, color added, as Bowmores tend to be. This is 12 years in first and second fill ex bourbon and ex sherry. So there's a mix of casks here. It's got some bourbon, some sherry, some first fill, some second fill or refill, I suppose. I don't know the percentages, so I don't know like if it's like 20, 80 or something like that. It's not super duper sherry in my experience, so there's probably only so much sherry actually in there, but it doesn't come across like obviously like all ex bourbon, but there's a little bit of sherry aspect to it. This is about 25 ppm, so it is an Isla Scotch. It is peated, but it's not like super duper peated. It's not like turbo peated. It's like half as peated as your Ardbeg. So, despite the fact that I'm pretty sure the peat and malt comes from the same place, I think it's like they don't take heavily peated malt. They only take I guess moderately peated malt. It's still like pretty like on the peated elements, but it's way less on them than like Ardbeg or Lafroig or Lagavulin or something like that. So again, we'll do out of 100, 25 points for aroma, 25 points for palate, 25 for finish, 10 for texture, and 15 for my overall personal experience. This is a color of her. It's kind of a not quite a bourbon, like a maybe like a lighter bourbon color, but this is almost certainly color added. You would have to have a whole lot of sherry in here to get this color naturally at 12 years. So this definitely is colored. And the one thing that, and we'll see if it transpires here today, which I assume it will, but my one major complaint about this particular bottle in the past, and perhaps other Bowmore OB offerings, is they're a little bit on the lighter side. And what I mean by that is like they're like this one is 80 proof. It is quite a bit watered down. Ah! Oopsie. We would rather that not be the case. In my air rage, I have spilled it on the desk. God damn it. It's going to smell like peated whiskey in here. Okay. So, let's see what we can get out of this. And this is also the one that I've infamously given the black rubber hockey mat note to. So, and I still get that, like, again, like today, like, the main olfactory presence on this is like a rubber, it's like a rubber note. Of course, we like to say black rubber hockey mat, but it does have like a tire kind of rubber, black rubber, burnt rubber thing about it. Kind of getting in deeper there. There is some today. There is some kind of sherry elements on the nose, I feel. I feel like I'm getting some amount of that dried fruit kind of note. Um, there is kind of a gentle sweetness about it. But I don't want to go as so far as to call it like raisins and dates, like you might get with like something heavily sherried. But it does feel like dried fruit. I almost want to say it's um, like dried apricot. Maybe like a dried dark cherry. Um, but not really like super raisiny and datey, but it's almost like a little bit, maybe like a little bit brighter than raisins and dates. But they definitely don't feel like thick and juicy and jammy. It's kind of like dry. And kind of just like maybe a gentle sweetness in the background. Like a gentle kind of simple syrup sort of thing. Okay. I'm going to try this on the palate. Um, Slancheva. So one of the things I didn't say about the nose on this one is I didn't kind of find it very smoky. It was kind of like the peat elements kind of like appeared sort of as like a rubber. When you move to the palate though, you do get some of that smoke character. Kind of a light general wood smoke. That being said, the arrival on this is a little bit thin. It is a little bit on the thin side for me. The overall texture of it seems to suffer quite a bit with this ABV. I can really tell that this was maybe diluted a little bit too much. Would have liked maybe 46% alcohol. At 80 proof, it is kind of drinking a little bit on the watery side. That being said, you do kind of like get some of those smoky elements on the palate. There's a little bit of sweetness in there. You also get some of those like dry fruit elements. Maybe just a tinge of spiciness. Finish doesn't occur to me to be like super crazy long, but maybe like medium minus. There is kind of a lemony thing about it. Like lemon and dried fruits. A little bit of slightly sweet though. Just like barely sweet. A detectable amount of sweetness. The smoky elements are still presenting on the nose, kind of like tire, rubber mat. I don't really get too much out of the bourbon barrel here. I don't know if like I don't know if like there's not that much bourbon barrel in it. People try to find how much what the exact split is on this, but um, for kind of lighter like non-sherried notes, use like maybe like a citrus and maybe like a floral aspect, but that's about it. Finish, a little bit spicy. You get some of that wood smoke, small amount of like that um, tarry kind of character. A little bit tarry on the finish. Um, just a gentle sweetness, some smoke, some tar, a little bit of like clove spice. Um, Finish is like medium minus. It's not quite short, um, but it's not quite long enough for me. Um, so we'll call it medium minus in length. And I think the one biggest black mark for me on this whiskey is it's too thin. Absolutely on the palate is too thin. Definitely could have used like 46% alcohol. Um, but I think even the 15-year offering is only 43%. I don't know how much they offer the 18-year at. But this one, I'm not really actually feeling like it needs that much more age. It's just, it's a little bit watered down. Like these flavors could be so much more vibrant on the palate if this was offered at like 46% alcohol. But for me right now, kind of how this is drinking, right on the attack, it's like a little thin, and we go searching for some non-smoke flavors. We do get some of the smokiness in there, a little bit of spiciness. But these are kind of things in the, like the mid palate to back palate that grow as you hold it on the tongue. You don't really get like the initial like citrus or dried fruit character or anything like that that like kind of like presents immediately. You have to kind of go searching for that while you wait for sort of like the mid palate back palate smoky notes to kind of come in. So the palate definitely has suffered as a result of the amount of dilution that's on this one for me personally. So we'll take one more sip and then we'll start talking about the actual numbers here. Obviously, the texture is not going to be scored very well. Um, but there's some good things going on the aroma. I like the little bit of floral aspect. I like the little bit of like lemon in there. I kind of like that. The palate or the nose isn't overwhelmed with the smoky notes. And the other thing too is the smoky notes that's presenting on the palate are a little bit interesting. It's, you know, maybe you don't like the smell of burnt rubber in your whiskey, but it's a little bit different than other peated noses. So that's kind of like something to be interested with. I'm gonna try to focus on the finish for a minute. You get a little bit of grassiness, actually. There's a little bit of grassiness in there. Again, you get that little bit of tarriness, a little bit of creosote, slight sweetness. You don't really get maybe like a vague barrel element, but you don't really get any of the fruits on the finish. You don't really get much of a barrel aspect either. Kind of all of the casking seems like it's gone out of the finish. The finish is almost all kind of thick smoke characteristics, like the tar, the creosote, this sort of thing. So you kind of finish very much on the peat elements that are in here. All right. So out of 25, let's see how we would rate the aroma here. There's a good bouquet of notes here. That being said, it's mostly, kind of what you get. And the other thing too is we're getting a good bouquet of notes, but the notes are not particularly strong. The strongest thing I think you have going on here is like that tar character, or not tar, like rubber characteristic, that black rubber. And like actually the kind of like floral aspects are, for me right now, maybe the second strongest thing out of this. And then you kind of have like that dried fruit, dried mix of like, I don't know, like dried apricot, dried cherry, or something like that below that. And you get like a slight amount of sweetness and citrus below that. And maybe like a very small, like medicinal note in there too. But those kind of like last few are things that we're kind of really digging into. So it's pretty good. The nose is pretty good. But the intensity could use some work. The intensity of the notes is kind of like a little lacking. Just wish they were a little bit more vibrant and a little bit less of a whisper. So we'll call this 16. I'll call it 16. 16 and then 25. All right, now we're going to talk about the palate, which is the most disappointing part of this whiskey for me, is the palate just doesn't deliver for me. Like there's some decent expression on the nose and on the finish, but man, the palate could use work. So initially on the entry, not a whole lot of flavor, a little bit thin. Then you kind of like leave it on the palate, and you're kind of like getting maybe a whisper tier amount of sweetness into it. It almost kind of feels like a blended Scotch up. We'll say mid palate almost. Hold on. Yeah, so yeah, kind of like hunting a little bit, and then you kind of have a growing kind of tar, clove note, wood smoke. That's kind of like near the end of the mid palate into the back palate. So it's not great. It's definitely a letdown. It's not. We can't even call it like a donut. Sometimes you call it like the palate like a donut palate, where it's like you get some flavor and then the mid palate just has nothing, and then you swallow it and get flavor again. It's like not even that. It's like there's nothing until like you've held it on the palate for quite a while and you start getting some of those smoky and char kind of elements come out. Um, Give this an 11 on the palate, which is not good, but it's not a good palate. All right, so we're going to focus on the finish. And again, it does feel like maybe just long enough. It does feel like it cuts off a little bit early, but it's mostly okay. Um, kind of feel like I'm getting like a little bit of a dried pear thing on the nose right now. Kind of just in that dried fruit basket. Initially, a little bit of like spiciness, some of those tar elements, slight amount of wood smoke. Um, some like creosote, like a thick black, kind of a slightly bitter aspect. That's about it. Nothing really is like taking this out very well either. That's one thing that I'll say is a lot of times on these on the finish of whiskeys you'll get like a note or a couple of notes that like really linger with you for a while. That's kind of like the main like at the end of the finish, the main kind of like notes to kind of take it out of the palate, out of the taste buds, if you will. I'm not really getting a whole lot of that. It's like you kind of get like a kind of like a short burst of a couple different things, and then things kind of fade away. Um, but it's reasonable. Um, but it's not great. Um, the notes here are like maybe medium in intensity. They're not like super strong. Um, and also, again, it seems like it's all smoked malt related notes. You're not really getting any of the fruits or barrel characteristics or anything like that. I think somehow those are gone. Um, we'll give this 14 on the finish. All right, so now we're going to talk at a 10 about the texture. Unfortunately, we do have to talk about the texture, which is not good. It is very watery. Um, is very thin for me. Um, Unfortunately for me, this is straight up 1 out of 10. This is 1 out of 10 in texture. It's unfathomably thin. Like even for like 40% alcohol, it still comes across way too thin. And clearly, what the casks that they used to vat for this particular bottling did not stand up to the amount of water that they put into it. It just is what it is. There's too much water in the product for me. Wish there was less. You can't even get any kind of good mouthfeel out of this. It's just very thin. So, out of 15, we'll talk about my personal experience with this whiskey. Despite the fact that we've said some terrible things about it, um, I do enjoy this whiskey. I actually do enjoy it. The thing is though is you have to kind of like be in for an experience where you're not too concerned about trying to really assess and think about the palate too much. The palate is a glaring hole in this whiskey. It is not providing a lot of flavor. It is a very thin in that regard. That being said, there is kind of like a peat character on this particular bottling that is quite tasty. It's a little bit different. It's not the same kind of like peat elements you experience on other Isla Scotches. So it does have some uniqueness in the fact that the peat that you experience here is a little bit different, a little bit more in the black rubber tar and smoke kind of realms, in a little in less on the like green, super medicinal, super meaty elements. Would like to see this distillery at a higher proof. That's kind of mostly what we're hoping for. I think out of Bowmore, I would love if Bowmore had an offering that was like young and brash, similar to like the Lagavulin 8 or the like Lefroy Quarter or like the Wee Beastie or something like that. Something that can really like have a higher ABV, have less cask influence involved, and just really showcase what Bowmore's distillate is capable of. I feel like that would be maybe a banger whiskey, but maybe we'll never know unless we find it in an independent bottle. But Bowmore kind of doesn't put its distillate out independent bottlers anymore, so it's kind of hard to get anything that they don't personally release. So yeah, it's not bad. I do like it, but there's a hole. There's a glaring hole in the palate for me. So out of 15, for me, I'll still give this a 7 out of 15, I feel, because I do enjoy the whiskey. I just wish it was less watery. That's kind of like where we're at with it. So if we tally up here real quick, if we have 16 and 11 and 14 and 1 and 7, it gives us a 49 out of 100, which is barely good. This is right on the line. At 48, it's only okay, so it's good. This is a good whiskey. It's barely good. But it's just lacking. It's lacking in a few ways, unfortunately. And I kind of knew that. I kind of knew that before going in here. I tried my best to give it a assessment on this day that was maybe redeemable, but the reality of the situation is it is a little thin. And man, this is just a prime example of a distillery trying to get more bottles out of the number of barrels that they have, and unfortunately diluting the product slightly too much. And the worst part is, I feel like this bottle would be a better product if it was at higher proof. But the thing is I think they still sell lots of these. Bowmore is a very popular distillery, I think. Trash ass bottle. So, despite the fact that it's like the worst part about it is, despite the fact that I feel like, man, this could be so good if it was a little bit more concentrated. I think it still sells quite a bit as it is, so they're not going to change anything. I don't think. Um, it is. I feel like going pretty well for them. But it does make me a little bit excited to try some of the other Bowmores that are maybe higher proof, have a better age statement. I think there's a world where this distillery is like pretty damn good, but its its official bottlings are not targeted at the connoisseurs market. They're just really not. They're targeted at the wider market, unfortunately, and that kind of makes them kind of a little weak sometimes in the eye of the connoisseur because we don't get the proof that we want. We get something that's a little bit more watery, unfortunately. So it's for the plebs. Well, we're not. It's not for plebs. It's for people that are not so invested. Creeks. That's all it is. People that aren't as invested. They want to pick a bottle of Isla Scotch and have it not be too smoky, and they just want to have throw a couple ice cubes in there and have a drink, and not think about it too much, right? And I think this is competitively priced. This is a great value in terms of like the greater Scotch market. A 12-year-old that this price that they offer it at is very inexpensive. But of course, it's inexpensive because of some of the specs we've already talked about. So it's cheaper. People still seem to like it. It's selling. What can I say? Even on the 43%, the palate was thin for me on the 15, but the price to quality was pretty good. Yeah, so that's kind of like, that's the thing is, this is kind of like for me a long time coming to maybe get some better age statements into the Bowmores. I would like to try the 15 and the 18, but the thing is like for example, if you put this up against the Macallan, right? The Macallan 12 is like more than twice the price of this. The 15-year-old bottle of this, I could get 7 or 8 of them for the price of a Macallan 18. So, you can't argue with the age statement for the dollar amount, right? And I think part of it is, yeah, we're getting a bit of an inferior product despite the good age statement. But that kind of just means, hey, maybe we need to go upriver a little bit and kind of pay a little more than what we pay for the 12. Maybe like, because there are 12-year-old whiskeys that cost the same as like Bowmore's 18-year-old whiskey on a discount, on a sale. So, if you can get an 18 for the price of a 12 and maybe it drinks as roughly as good as a 12 from a different distillery, then maybe that's just, that's what the connoisseurs got to do. They got to go upstream a little bit. But I still feel like, hey, there's so much potential here. I wish they would just put less water in the product. But clearly what they're doing is working. It's selling. People are buying it. So... and part of my anecdotal experience with that statement is the fact that when I was looking at the tickets for the individual tastings at the whiskey festival that we had here, Bowmore was one of the first events to sell out. It was gone like that, and there's no way that that's the case if this isn't going over well, right? So, what do I know? And I think it might have something to do too with the fact that it's got a good amount of smoke. It's got an individual distillate has an individual character. It's a great distillate, I think, but it's not as heavy and challenging and as approachable as the distillates coming out of like the other Isla distilleries, which kind of gives it some amount of approachability, which is going to make it popular in a wider audience. So, yeah.